All right, welcome to P Club Insider November 2022 issue, where I answer your questions about how to close way more SaaS deals. These questions typically come from the P Club online courses like SaaS Discovery Masterclass, Rig the Game, or some of our others. Some of these are asked me on LinkedIn in my direct messages or just on comments. And every now and then I will get somebody emailing me with questions. So I get a lot of questions every month about how to close more SaaS deals, how to run deal closing discovery. And so we're launching this new program where I take the most common questions I'm getting on a monthly basis and I answer them for you. So if you're watching this on YouTube, before we get into it, go ahead and like, subscribe, and comment onto this video. It'll help generate more exposure for other SaaS sellers. They'll appreciate that. But let's get into it. So the first question we have is, when doing discovery, what happens when the customers just want to see a demo, right? Like, you as a seller want to dedicate ideally your first call to just doing discovery. What happens when the customer's kind of like, just show me the demo? So I have a couple answers to this one. Really, I have two answers. The first one is expectation setting, right? So you can get ahead of this. You can be preventative about this in two different ways. One is sending an agenda email ahead of the call, outlining what you're going to talk about and ideally getting your customer to confirm, does that sound good? And hopefully most of it has to do with discovery with a little bit of teasing what exactly we do. And then the second one is setting, an upfront contract or a respect contract or social contract, whatever people call them these days, at the beginning of the call, where you establish the agenda, the outcome you're going for, and get your customers buy-in on how you're going to run the meeting. Now, sometimes that doesn't always work though. Sometimes they say, I was really hoping to see the product on this first call. And what I've found to work, again, this works in my selling context really well, so you judge for yourself if it'll work for you, is I kind of negotiate mutual discovery with them. I go, I totally get that. You were probably walking into this meeting thinking, you're going to get to see the product. So I'll make a deal with you. I can't imagine you just want to see the product for the product's sake, right? Like, you're probably not bored and you just want to see the latest SaaS application these days. My guess is the reason you want to see the product is because you already have a pretty well-defined problem that you probably spoke about internally, right? And now you're seeking a solution. And so what I'll do is I will show you the product, but every time I show you one or two things, I would in return, love the investment from you to answer a few of the questions I have about how you're defining the problem. So if we can make this a mutual kind of give and take, then I think that's probably going to be the win-win as far as how we run this meeting. Is that fair? Ending it with, is that fair or is that reasonable, is really hard to disagree with. That technique works for me almost every time. You have to be nimble because now you're going to have to do a little bit of demoing. I usually show one thing, and as soon as I know I'm hitting a hot button, I back up and say, help me understand why that's resonating. What challenge is going on that makes this solution relevant to you? So that's my answer, right? You pivot to a little bit of give and take, go from discovery to mutual discovery, but don't just become a demo monkey, right? Your job is not to just say yes, ma'am, or yes, sir to your customers and do exactly what they say. All right, next question. Curious, do you think any parts of your training could be used in email if you get an exchange going with a new prospect, specifically the building negative impact framework, summarize, open-ended, targeted impact? Okay, so this person is asking a question specific to my framework on how to build negative impact with negative impact questions. Generally speaking, I would say the answer to that question is no. This probably isn't going to apply very well in email because the negative impact framework of summarizing, asking an open question, asking a targeted question is a conversational framework, right? And so for that to work in email, you're relying not just on your prospect responding, but responding multiple times through a series of questions you're going to have. And so instead, what I found works best in email is you have to make a hypothesis of what their pain and negative impact are and lead with that. Now, you might be wrong, but that's what email is. That's what outbound messaging is you're going to be wrong a lot of the time. But what I found works best in email is if you can describe their pain and articulate their pain better than they can themselves, they'll automatically trust that you have the best solution, and your odds of booking a meeting or breathing life into a deal that's gone dark dramatically get higher. But like trying to ask a series, like complex multi-layered series of questions via email, probably not going to happen. Okay, let's get to the next one. I think my biggest struggle is how long it can take to pinpoint the business problem in a first call. It can be quite lengthy due to a director being my first point of contact. Directors, in my experience, don't know the business problems or impact as nearly as well as a VP. Therefore, I focus on taking the technical or process problems directors come to me with and start to build credibility with my questions that the VP would be qualified to answer. I feel like my biggest focus is using the onion to peel it back to a point where we need to include power in the next meeting. So Chris at Gong, did you usually have a VP on the first call? Is your experience with directors similar to where they didn't understand the business problem? I think you already answered the question. I think that's exactly the way to do it. To me, there are two ways to get to the VP. Number one, you have to solve the director's problem, right? So selling to their process problem is actually a really good idea, but it's also not enough. Number two, you have to make it clear that them introducing you to their boss is going to build credibility, not destroy it. And so the way to do that is you start asking questions that take a lot of business acumen, that demonstrate a lot of credibility, and that you know the problem space you're talking about. They might not be able to answer that, but that eventually leads to them introducing you to their boss who can answer it. Now, the other thing that you can do is set that as part of your objective setting at the beginning of the meeting. When you're setting the agenda, you can say something like, I did a lot of research and I've done this, kind of sales cycle, sell by cycle a lot. And what I found is in that 95% of the cases, if you end up getting serious about evaluating this, you're going to want to bring in your VP. It happens every time. Now, what I'm not asking is that we bring in the VP right now, but what I am asking is after I show you the demo and how we solve your problem, my goal is to get you so fired up about what we do that you're willing to go pound down your boss's door to bring him or her into a meeting with me. So is that a fair agenda? Like at the end of a demo, a call from now, can you just be clear with me about whether I've achieved that? And I won't be offended if I haven't. So that's another thing you can try. Give that a try. Again, certain things work well in certain sales contexts. So it might work really well in yours. It might not, but try it if you haven't tried it. Okay, next. Chris, thanks a lot for the lesson. Quick question. Isn't cause analysis the same process as identifying a business problem, but only backwards? So to take an example, actually, I'm not going to go into the example because I know exactly what he's asking, and I'm going to re-summarize it. So for those of you who aren't part of the online course, SaaS Discovery Masterclass, we have a framework for discovery. Identify the business problem and peel back the onion, and identify the root cause of the business problem, among several other steps that we'll leave out for now. The reason I talk about identifying the root cause, or what I call cause analysis, is because your features sell to causes, right? You can't sell until you know the root cause of a problem. If your car dies on the side of the road, you don't know how to fix it until you know what caused it. And so one of the points I would like to make is sometimes those two things happen backwards, right? So I'm going to give you an example. I could be selling, let's say, Gong to a VP of sales, and I say, tell me about your biggest challenges. And she says, our close rates are really low. In fact, they're declining, they're getting worse. Okay, so that's the business problem, right? That's a metric that she cares about. And I say, why do you think that is? And she says, well, my reps sound like donkeys on their calls. They're not very good. They're feature dumping. Okay, so now we've got the root cause. We've got, this is a very basic example, but we've got problem, we've got root cause. Now I'm going to show you how Gong makes your reps stop sounding like donkeys, stop feature dumping, therefore solving your close rate problem. Sometimes it happens in just the opposite way, right? So they lead with the root cause, in which case now you have the root cause and just have to peel the onion back until you get to the business problem. So here's the backwards version of this conversation. help me understand your biggest challenges when it comes to sales effectiveness. And the VP of sales answers, my reps sound like donkeys. They're feature dumping. And it's not good, like I sit next to them in the floor and they're not very good. And now I've got the root cause, but I'm going to peel back to figure out what the problem is so that I can justify a business case. I'm going to say, okay, your reps sound like donkeys. Interesting way of articulating that. But how is that showing up in the business, right? Like what challenge is that creating that's driving you to want to solve this? Or what metric is suffering as a result of that? I would just pick one of those three questions. That was a really long sentence, so just pick one. And then she peels back the onion and goes, well, our close rates have been dipping. And the reason I think is because my reps sound like donkeys. I don't know why I think that's so funny. I think it is though. So the short answer is yes. Sometimes those things happen in reverse. You have to develop enough fluency to identify which one are you dealing with. Business problem, in which case do some cause analysis, or cause, in which case peel back the onion until you find the problem that has that person hung up on that cause, on that symptom. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful. Okay, next question. For the outbound kickstart question, in other words, for the first question you ask for in a discovery call about challenges, how would you approach the conversation if it starts going in a direction towards a challenge your solution won't solve for? So should I say, when it comes to X initiative, that initiative being something you solve for, would that help still steer the conversation in the right direction toward problems we can solve? I'm curious to get your take on this. So awesome question. Basically, you're asking is, do we ask an open-ended enough question with the risk of knowing they could go in a direction we can't solve, but at least we'll know what's on their mind? Or do we ask a more targeted question about the problem area that we solve, knowing that they're going to talk about something we can solve, but maybe like there's some other burning fires that are going on, and this problem doesn't really make sense. They're just talking about it because I asked about it. I think there are a lot of ways you can tackle this. You can try both of those. The way I like to do it, like when I'm selling Quota Signal, which solves sales hiring, is I'll start with the more targeted version. I'll say, tell me about your biggest challenges when it comes to sales hiring. And after I've spent maybe 5 minutes on that, then I'll simply validate it. I'll zoom out from the conversation and I'll say, okay, so thanks for sharing. I'll summarize what I've learned so far. Did I get that right? And I'll say, let me just back up. Are we talking about something that ranks highly on your list of priorities? Like, are we talking about something that has energy behind it? Or are we barking up the wrong tree? Right? And now they're going to give me the opportunity to redirect me in the right direction, or in the right direction. I like doing it that way because it's more time efficient, right? You can start open-ended and just say, tell me what's, on your priority slide, but then you risk sorting through a bunch of problems that aren't relevant to you at all, and you waste your entire discovery call not finding any problem you can solve. So I would rather start by solving a problem I can solve and then validating, hey, do you give a shit about this? Like, is this painful enough? Does it rank highly enough, or should we, be tabling this until next quarter? So that's how I do it. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, I think we're on to the last question. So this question is referring to my discovery prompter, which is a technique I recommend for outbound discovery calls, right? Like you booked the meeting outbound, they don't know you from Adam. And so it's hard to just dive in and start asking a bunch of questions, right? You kind of have to earn the right to ask questions. And so in that situation, I recommend what I call a discovery prompter, which is a 3 to 5 slide short deck where you walk them through the pain you solve, not your solution or your company, but the pain you solve, a narrative that speaks well to it. And then you back up and say, anyway, enough about us and the pains that we solve. Help me understand your biggest challenges. And the idea is, if your pain narrative is on the money, they'll gush about their pain because you just resonated with them. And so the question is, like, what if you sell a lot of different products? And, this can be really difficult because, like, what pain narrative do you talk about? You're going to need your product marketing team's help on that one. But I can give you one piece of tactical advice. I would find a common pain, or a common story rather, that weaves in some of those pains or all of those pains, and then end your discovery prompter with a menu slide of all the pains you solve, right? It could be like a quadrant of like 9 different pains which map to the 9 products or whatever you solve, or use cases or whatever the case is. And you say, so the way this shows up, in most of our customers' businesses is they'll be dealing with this challenge, this challenge, this challenge. Maybe you don't want to do 9, maybe like 5 at the most, and then get them to, choose their own adventure. So that's what I would do. I realize there's a lot more to that. That's a complex question, but hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully this series is helpful. In fact, I would love to hear if it is, so that I know if I should keep doing it. My plan is to do this once a month and ask or answer all the most common SaaS sales questions that I've been getting throughout the interwebs. But if I don't get a lot of response, then naturally I'm not going to continue doing this. So you tell me, was this useful? Do you want me to keep doing this? If so, hit like on YouTube, comment below if you're getting this via email, reply to me. Give me a sense of life here. Okay, am I resonating? Again, hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. And if you have any questions that you want me to answer, if you're part of the online courses, write the question in the comments in the courses, shoot me an email, shoot me a LinkedIn, whatever. There's a lot of ways to get a hold of me. But thank you, and we'll talk to you next month.